How are we all? Happy, I hope. It's very sunny here at the minute, so everybody's in a good mood. So today we're going to go through the video tutorial for the Essential Edit top, which is the one that I happen to be wearing as always. So firstly, let's just think about why I'm designing this Essential Edit collection. And really, I suppose it's kind of a capsule wardrobe that I'm thinking about. It's all made up of the things that we wear. Now, we all get caught up in sewing things that are beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you end up with a wardrobe full of glorious clothes that you actually don't wear. So my inspiration for this new collection is just wardrobe workhorses, really, things that you are going to wear again and again and again. And for me, this type of top is just great for layering. It's great for under something that's businessy. As you can see today, I'm just wearing my jeans. It's just a real sort of versatile classic, really. So the one that I have on is, let me just think, start again. So there's lots of different versions. So there are two necklines. One's higher than this. They're both round, but one's higher than this one for the winter. And this is what I would call the low one. It's not very low, as you can see. So it's still quite modest. So it can be worn in lots of different occasions. I've obviously got the long sleeve version. There's a 3/4 length version. And today I'm going to do the short t-shirty type length. More because that's all I've got the fabric for, but it's great for you to see the different styles. And then the one that I've got on is the short version. The longer one goes much further down here to the hips. So the short version is just below your waistline. So we're not kind of up here showing our midriff. So it's still quite a nice, flattering style to wear. Now, why did I redesign a tee? So I teach a lot, or have taught a lot, as you guys who are familiar with the brand know. And what I find, and lots of people find, is that when it's a jersey top, everything is skin tight. And that's not always what we want. It's certainly not what I want. So the way this is designed is it uses the stretch of the fabric across your bust, but not kind of too much. I don't feel restricted across the bust area. But if you look, it gently just goes down. So it's not skin tight, showing all my lumps and bumps. And I like that. There is enough ease here in the waist for it not to be skin tight, but I still get that lovely shape, which is what I'm after. So that's why we've gone down this direction. So this is the Essential Edit top, sorry. And this is the second one in the collection. And hopefully you love it and you enjoy the tutorial. I'm already set up to cut out here on the table. So I'll turn you around so that we can have a look. We're going to go through this nice and gently and enjoy the process. You really do need with you your written instructions as well as my voice. The two combined really do give you everything that you need in order to do the t-shirt. It's a relatively simple make. As soon as you get over the fact that you're using stretch fabric, if that's the first time you're going to use stretch fabric, there are kind of two techniques that we're going to do that may be unfamiliar to you. That's the neckline. So we have a lovely neckband here that we're going to put on. And then the other thing, which you can still see at the neckline actually, the double stitch line there, and on the cuffs, it's the same on the hem. And that's with a twin needle. So we'll go through a bit of the do's and don'ts with a twin needle. But yeah, if you're ready, I'm ready. I'll spin you around and we'll get cut out. So here we are. I don't want you to get stressed about the particular layout that I'm using. You're going to follow the layout that's in your size range and for the combination that you're using. As I said, because I'm using the short sleeves, I can use less fabric. So I can fold the fabric right sides together into the centre. And because of the size I wear, I can fit the front here on the fold, the back on the fold. The only other pieces then to worry about, we have the neckline. The neckband, sorry, and there are two different neckbands, remember, so do make sure you're doing the correct one for the either high or low band that you're wearing. Also, some people tend to think that these should be cut on the bias, so it gives you more stretch. Because the fabric is stretch, we don't want to do that because then we have too much stretch. So we're going to go and we're going to put it on the fold just like that. And then the other thing we have is the sleeve down here, and that just fits, you can't see, bring it up a little bit, that just fits across this section that I folded over, and I'm going to do the short version. So there's nothing too exciting about the layout once that you've chosen the one that you want. What I wanted to just emphasize, which I do on lots of videos, is the fact that the fold of the fabric can really cause problems and add extra fabric where you don't need it. So if I can just explain that, I'll exaggerate it on this piece. If we have a gap between the edge of the fabric and the edge of the pattern here, whatever that gap is, we double it. So let's say you only do it by 0.5 centimetre, which is very easy. That means you've added 1 centimetre here. And if you do the same on the other side, you've added another centimetre, so we're at 2 centimetres. And then it's going to fit very differently across the bust, but more importantly, it's going to fit differently at the neckline. So I really want you to make sure that you have that right on the fold, and you're going to pin there first. Okay, so we're going to place on the fold and we're going to put our pins there first so that we can check all the way down that it works. Because what happens sometimes is we put one pin and then we work around this area, and before we know it, when we get back down to the bottom here, we've pushed something out and it doesn't fit. So I really do want you to pay attention to that area. When you've done all the way down there, you're definitely going to want one in every corner, so every sort of point within the pattern. Can you see that I'm sort of smoothing the paper? That's just so I take all of the ripples out, okay? And then you're going to do ones in between. You don't want to go mad with the pins, but equally you do need to make sure that the shape of the pattern piece is actually pinned onto the fabric. Now I'm going to spend some time doing this, and then I'm going to go through the construction marks that I want you to mark onto these patterns, because there are a few circles that you will notice on your front piece and on your neckband, and they're really important for this type of neckband. So we'll go through that when we're sat down at the machine, but you will need your hand sewing needle and a contrasting colour thread for that. Okay, so I'm going to cut out. I'm also going to spend some time setting up my machine, and I suggest you do the same. So I want you to take some of the scrap fabric and just have a play, see what needle you're going to use, and make sure the tension is set up properly. I'll spend a little bit of time talking you through what I've done with my machine, but obviously every machine is slightly different. So I'll catch up with you in a minute. Okay, so here I am. I have my machine set up. I just wanted to spend a little moment talking to you about the machine setup. So first off, I have put a jersey needle in there. If you read through the instructions, you'll see that's not always necessary, in my opinion. I can hear everybody shouting, but that's just my personal opinion. But I have put one in for this project. What I think my biggest tip for stretch fabric is to go slowly, because some needles kind of skip and jump, and it's the speed at which you sew. So I just want you to take a breath and enjoy the process and just go nice and steady, and that shouldn't be an issue for you. But there are lots of tips within the instructions. The other thing is that I am using what they call, bear with me, Cerilon by Metler, and that's a type of thread. That's what it is, thread. That stretches. Is exactly the same type of thing as the Guthmann Maraflex, is it called? Yeah, Maraflex, and that does the same thing. So I have both of them here. So they do actually look exactly like any other thread, but what they do is that they actually have a little bit of, sorry, so you can see it, a little bit of stretch in there. Hopefully you can see. So it's not like elastic, it doesn't pull lots, but there's just a subtle stretch. And what that means is that when you're stitching stretch fabric, you don't have to think about the type of stitch that you're using, because the thread is going to do the stretching for you. So it really does take out some of the work. It can be pricey and it has a limited colour range compared to other threads. So you may not want to go that way. If you don't go that way, that's absolutely fine. For years, I've not used this product, so it is absolutely fine. If you don't use this product, what you're going to do is probably something very similar to that. Hopefully you can see, let me go a bit closer, that is stretching and it's a little zigzag stitch. So some machines have it, it's like a lightning bolt setting. If not, there's instructions in your manual as to how to set your zigzag to the right stitch length and width in order to achieve it. But it gives exactly the same end result, so we don't need to stress about it, which is always good because we can be stressed enough, can't we? The other thing to notice when I'm stitching today, I'm not finishing any of my seams. That is a total personal choice, especially when it comes to stretch fabric, because stretch fabric isn't going to fray. So you're not overlocking or zigzagging in order to stop it fraying. What it does do, just to be sort of totally transparent, is it can, sometimes your fabric can kind of roll and create a bump, like within your seams. But I'm not stressing about that, so I'm not going to finish any of my seams today, and on my head be it. It is completely your choice, and again at the beginning of the instructions it goes through a lot of information about the choices that you can make around that. Okay, so I am all set up. I do also have with me my twin needle for when I'm doing the hems, etc. Again, you don't have to have that, but it's a really nice technique to learn. So we'll keep that in mind. I have my instructions here in front of me and I have cut everything out. Now I'm just going to swap you round so that you can see a close-up, because what we're going to do next is do the construction marks. Now I have already snipped the marks on the armholes and the sleeve. Remembering if there's two little notches, you need to put 2 snips, because that's the only thing that indicates which is the back of the sleeve. So you don't want your sleeve on the wrong way round. The ones we're going to concentrate on are the dots like these. So we have, I think there's 4 of them to mark on this one and 2 of them to mark on your front piece. So I'll show you how to do that. So what you need is a hand sewing needle and a contrasting thread, and we'll go through that together. And then we'll get sewing. Okay, so hopefully you can see this clearly. I'm behind the camera, which can be a bit awkward, but I've just threaded a needle with some bright red because it'll contrast with the colour of the fabric that we have. So on each of these circles, there's 1, 2 there, but can you also see there's a little half circle here and here? So they also need indicating. So I'll show you how to do both of them and then I'll leave you to do your own. Just note there is also a similar one like this on your neckline at the front on the fold, and there is also a full circle like this on the same piece, so that's the front, but it's up near the shoulder, so you're going to do the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our needle in at one side of the circle and bring it out at the other side and pull through. We're going to leave a long tail, okay? And then we're going to come back around and do the same. So I've looped and I've come back around and I'm going to go through and again. So let me just put this thread out. So I'm going to leave that big loop. So I've got a long tail here, I've got a big loop here, and I'm going to leave this long tail there. And that is what I'm going to do. So if I show you on this one, what that actually means is that I can pull apart the fabric like that. Can you see that the thread is stretching? So I can pull it until it's at its limit, excuse me, and then I can snip in the middle. So I now have a mark here on this half. Now on this half I'm going to take a hold of this bit tightly because I need to pull it through the paper. Yep. So I'm just going to pull a hole through the paper, and then I have exactly the same mark on that side. So when I've finished, I'm going to have bits of thread all over, but they are very important. So I'll do it again on this bottom one for you. Move those threads out of the way. Sorry, actually, I was going to show you how to do it on this one. This one, you're not actually marking two sides because it's on the centre, it's only actually one. So it's not as complicated really. Now, just whilst I'm showing you this, what I suppose I ought to say is you could mark this with a fabric pen if you like. That's absolutely fine. I always worry about fabric pens sometimes on things that will be seen, like bits of fabric that will be seen, because sometimes they don't come off properly. So just make sure that if that's what you're going to do, that the pen really does wash off of the fabric that you're using. Do a little test. So on this one, we just have to go through the fabric. Can you see there? Just gone through the fabric. It's just gone through both sides. But again, I'm going to do a big loop just so it makes sure that we have things there so we don't lose it. And then I'm going to cut it off so that when we take this side off and we unfold, you can see that notch is marked, or that construction mark, sorry, is marked. So you have a few of them to do. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 on this piece and 2 on your front. Once you've done those, we're going to start the pinning process before we stitch. So I'll change the camera angle so that you can see it, but we're going to need the front and back of your project. Good luck. Okay, so we're headlong into the stitching now, guys. I hope you're as excited as I am. I love this fabric, by the way. I think I'm going to look quite cute. So this is the back, and we've got the right side of the fabric facing the ceiling. And over here, I have the front. So again, just check in that you have all of your circles marked. We're going to place with right sides together the front down on top. And then we're going to match the side seams like so. And we're going to match across the shoulders at the top. Once we've done that, we're going to pin everything in place. And then we're just simply going to stitch, and we're going to stitch at a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance down each shoulder and then down each side. Now, some people get a little bit stressed out in terms of whether this bit, the curve, matches perfectly. What I'm going to say is you are in charge. I do say this a lot, but we are in charge. We are in charge of making the fabric do exactly what we want it to do. Because what you probably find is that your front piece is wider because of our bust. So it won't lay flat. There'll be kind of like a rook like this in the middle. That's perfectly normal. That's just because of the shapes of our bodies, and all of our bodies are different shapes. So I'm not going to stress about that. So we're going to pin so that everything matches down that side, and the same on the other side. And then we're simply going to stitch. Now again, just to reiterate, my tip for stitching is to go nice and steady. Some people may be experienced and they may want to rush through this, and that's absolutely fine. But nothing beats slow and steady. When you're rushing, generally, that's when mistakes happen, and that's when the unpicker comes out. So for me, I'd rather you just go nice and steady. This is not a super long project anyway, so you shouldn't be feeling anxious about how long it's going to take. But we're just going to stitch across here, here, and down each side. Once we've done that, we're going to take a hold of our neckband, but we'll already be at the machine by then, so I will go through that at that point. The most difficult part of this project really is the neckline, so I will spend some time going through that with you. The rest of it should be a doddle. Just wanted to show you how slow I was going to go, and also just show you, if you didn't know, how you measure the seam allowance. So you might not be able to read them, but on this machine plate there are different lines and there are numbers on each line. So mine go 10, then it's blank, then it's 20, and then it's blank. And they're millimetres. That's 10 millimetres, 15 millimetres in between, 20 millimetres, 25. So for those of you that don't know, 15 millimeters is 1.5 centimeters. What my machine then has up here are the equivalent lines, but in inches. So I've got 3/8 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch, etc. So I can line up the edge of my fabric with either the 1.5 centimeter, the 15, or the 5/8 of the inch, which is further back. And I know then that I'm going to be okay. So let's just talk about how slowly I'm going to do this. So I'm going to do it normally, if you like. So I'm not doing this for effect. I'm going to do my back stitch as normal. And then I'm just going to gently stitch. Now it's important with stretch fabric, especially fabric which is more stretchy than this, that you help it to go through the machine. So you're not kind of holding it here and stretching it backwards. Sometimes if it's extra stretchy, what I may suggest is that you almost push it in front so you've got a bump, so that it's the machine that does the work and not you. The other thing I want you to keep checking is that this bit of the fabric over here, which is generally heavier, is kind of keeping up. So again, it's not causing any drag. So I'm going nice and steady. I'm not stressing. Okay, I am talking. But this is sort of the speed. I also find it less anxious, because let's be honest, we're not doing this to induce anxiety. Generally, we're doing it because we want to relax. So I'm going to finish this side seam, and then I'm going to go on and do the 2 shoulder seams and the other side seam. So I'll meet you when we've finished, and let's talk about neckbands. Right, so we're now on to step 3, which is to start your neckband. So I have the neckband here. Our first step is to join these short edges. Sorry, let me get a better angle. There we go. Join these short edges together. Now, remember earlier we were talking about seam allowances. So on the neck, it's 1 centimetre. So we're going to stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance down here. So we're going to line that up with the 1 centimetre mark on the edge of my fabric, and I'm going to simply stitch. We're then going to be at the ironing board, but if you could take your pins with you too, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, so here we are, that's what I've stitched. We're just going to press that seam open. Now it is naturally falling, and to be fair, a lot of the time with stretch fabric, you can just finger press, they call it, so that this works. But we are just going to pop the iron on it anyway, just so that you can see the difference that it makes. So it's all nice, lovely and flat. So that's our first step, or rather our second step, isn't it? The next step is that we're going to fold the band so that the wrong sides are together. Now, whilst we do this, we're being very careful that we don't stretch anything, because if we stretch it, we're already creating a problem for ourselves, okay? So we're just simply going to fold in half, and we're going to pin. We're going to pin at that seam so that everything matches. And then we're going to go around and we're going to find the dots that we marked, and we're going to do the same. We're going to pin them together, and we're just going to do that with all of them. So we've got 4 different places where we're going to pin to start off with, and once I've done that, we're going to just press everything in place. So you see the 2 dots? I'm just going to put them together, so that we know we haven't stretched anything and we're not creating any problems for ourselves. So we're all pinned. Now I'm simply going to press between all of that. Now it can be a bit tricky, but just be very careful. You're not going to be stretching anything. So you're just going to pop the iron down, and it really can be as quick as that really. I'm making sure these raw edges are matching. Sorry, bring you up a bit. I'm making sure the raw edges on this side are matching. And then I'm just going to bring the iron down. Once we've done this, we can pop some more pins in if we like, just to keep it in the same place. But it's not totally necessary. What is necessary is that we then take our bodice that we've stitched. So there we go. We're all folded in half, everything matching, and we've matched the dots. We're then going to take this band and we're going to put it up to the neckband on our bodice. So you need a hand sewing needle again, I'm afraid, and your bodice and this band. So we'll sit down because it definitely needs a bit of a sit down, and we'll go through that together. I think this is the best angle for us. So what I have here is the bodice the right way around, so I can see the right side of the fabric. And then I have our neckband that we've just worked on. What I'm going to do is take the side that I've pinned with the mark that's opposite the seam. So this is the seam. So I'm going to take this one over here. And I'm going to match that dot to the one at the front of the bodice. Okay. I'm going to pin all the way through to make sure that everything is matching. I'm then going to do the same to all of the others. So I'm going to take the next one and I'm going to match it to the dot on the front. I say the dot, that's because that's what it was on the pattern. It's actually your tacks, the red thread in my case. I'm going to do the same over here. And I'm always checking underneath that everything matches. In a sec, I'm going to hold it up so you can see exactly what I've done. And then the back, where the seam is, I'm going to match to the centre of the back. This is always the tricky one because you're kind of fighting all the excess fabric at the same time. Because what you'll see is that the neck band is smaller than the actual neckline that's on your bodice. Sorry, I've lost my mark there. Let me just, if you do lose your mark, fold the back piece in half. There we go. And then I can match the two. Hopefully yours isn't as tricky as I've just made it look. There we go. So let me hold that up in a way that makes more sense to you. So this is what we have. So each of these points, I'll start at the front. We have the neckband here, so it's the right side showing. The raw edges are all at the top and they're matching with the raw edge of the bodice. So the folded bit is here. Okay, so down within the bodice here. Now that I've matched all those 4 pins, I'm going to just simply, right on the marks that we did, I'm just going to put a few stitches through all the layers. And all that means is that I can then take away the pins, so that when I do the next step, the pins are not in the way and causing me a problem. So I'm not going mad. I think I've just done 3 stitches there. Again, with that contrasting thread, and then I can take the pins out. I'm going to do that at all 4 of these points. If you do the same, and when we come back, I'll show you how to deal with the bits in between. So here we are with our neckband tacked in the 4 points, and those 4 points are actually the quarter points of the neckband and the quarter point of the neckline on the bodice. So that's the process. So we got this bit in between, so you can see this is the neckline at the front and this is the band. So this is longer than that. But what I don't want to do is to stretch this. This is the only part I want to stretch. So what I want to do is to find the halfway points of each. So I think that's about the halfway point and to there. And I'm just going to do a corresponding pin. Can be tricky because you're making sure everything is in line. And I'm going to put the pin on the stitch line, so it's 1 centimetre in. Okay, and then you'll see the bit that's the problem doesn't seem to be as huge anymore, and we're just going to gently stretch the band until it meets the neckline. Now you shouldn't have to stretch too hard. It should just be a gentle stretch. And again, you know, you can pull it so much that it feels easy. If you pull it all of it and you pull everything, then yes, eventually everything will match. But that's not necessarily the right thing to do because you've stretched this cut edge of the neckline and you can cause yourself problems. So you can see there that this is trying to flip up because ultimately when we've stitched it, we're going to do that. And that's when our lovely neckband comes into play. So I want you to take your time with this. Don't overstretch anything. Put all your pins in place and then we're going to stitch it. Now, some people might think this is overkill, doing all the tacking and the matching the dots, but it does make for an easier neckband. I do want to put a disclaimer in here. The length of this neckband is very important. So it's important that you've done your shoulders with the right seam allowance, you stitch the neckband with the right seam allowance, you cut it out properly, because all of those things can increase the size or decrease the size of this neck area. The other thing is some fabrics stretch more or less, and then it can create a baggy neckband. If you want to do at this point, you can tack all of this and turn it over and see if it's worked. And by worked, what I mean is that it lays nice and flat here. So there's no big lumps or bumps. And if there is, you may want to reduce the overall length of this band in order for that not to happen. Now, it shouldn't always happen, but sometimes it might happen. So I guess I'm putting in an apology if you've put all this work in and then you have to unpick and do it again. Unfortunately, there's nothing that I can do to stop that happening as a designer other than to warn you. And it might be that at this point, when you're just doing the pinning, when you've pinned it all the way round and then you're just checking, it might be at this point that you realise that you have a problem, because it might be that when this turns around, there's like loads of discrepancy here, like it ripples, and there's no way that you think that that's going to lay flat on your body. At that point, you can make it smaller, and hopefully you haven't spent too long unpicking by that point. Okay, I'm going to finish my pinning and then we'll stitch it on the machine. I'll stitch it with you, so I'll join you back at the machine, and then we'll have a look at what we're supposed to do with these twin needles. So I've done all that stitching. A good practice as well now is to pull out all those tacks that you did, because what you can find if you don't pull them out is that you get that contrasting thread caught in the actual stitching, and sometimes it can be a bit of a nightmare to take out. So just get rid of the loose bits of thread. Obviously the tack that you've just done, you want to stay there because that's replacing the pin. We're just going to pull out all of these loose threads and get rid of them. And then we need to deal with what's in between. So whilst I pull this out, I'm going to tell you what we're actually doing here. We're going to be stretching the neckband so that it fits the opening. Now, when I say that out loud, I always cringe a little bit, because yes, we are going to be stretching the neckband, but maybe not as much as what you're anticipating. So it's a real gentle thing that we're doing. Let me show you, because we're going to pin it first. Now I've got rid of all those extra bits that we don't need. I'm going to bring you so you can see properly. For this process, I think it's easier if you have a machine that allows you. You can take this section off. It just stops the things getting caught underneath, and then you can feed the neck over, so you've got nothing underneath. I always start at the back, and that's I don't know, a habit, I suppose. I think it always looks better because you're going to kind of go over this stitch, and it's kind of better if it's at the back. I don't know, but that's what I do. So we're going to use our 10 millimeters, so 1 centimeter seam allowance. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stitch nice and slowly. I've got my pins, but you'll notice I still have to pull a little bit. Because we had to pull for it to be straight when we were pinning, we also have to do the same when we're stitching. So I'm kind of taking some of the slack at the front. I'm going steady again. I'm not going slow because you're watching me. I'm going slow because you need to. Now, can you see that this curve is happening? And that's the curve of the neckline. So that's how the bodice was cut. And we do actually want to keep that curve. So we're not going to pull everything straight. We're going to keep the curve of that lovely neckline, because otherwise we're going to cause ourselves problems. So we're just coming over the shoulder seam. Sorry, my fingers get in the way when I have to take out the pins. Just going nice and gently. We're still doing the curve. I'm not pulling too much though. I'm not trying not to stretch the actual bodice. I'm trying to only stretch the waistband, the neckband, so that it fits the neck. So you're doing a lot here. You're checking that the seam allowance is still in the right place. You're checking that the raw edges are still matching. You're making sure everything's flat. You know, it can be a tricky thing to do. So slow and steady is always the answer when it's a tricky part of the project. Now I'm just coming up to the halfway point here. So I'm going to continue. I'll let you do the same. When you finish this, you can take out all of those red tacks that you did, and then I shall see you at the ironing board, and we'll get this pressed so that you can get a better impression as to what it's supposed to look like. Okay, so we're all stitched around now, and I can tell that this is going to look quite good. So I can see if I took everything under that this is not too big. So you're just going to have a check of that. The next step then, we're on step 5, is to press all of this seam allowance down towards the bodice. Now it can be a bit tricky because it's kind of not flat anymore, especially here, because all of this seam allowance needs tucking underneath. So just take your time. What you're going to be doing, part of this process, is you're stretching the seam allowance actually, so that it lays nice and flat. Hopefully you can see that that's happening. That's what we're doing. So we're not stretching the front of this band, as in the folded edge, but those raw edges are getting flattened out and stretched so that everything lays nice and flat. As soon as that seam starts to peek back, then it affects that neckband. So you're really going to spend some time on this. You're going to get some steam on your iron if you need it, and you're really going to give that a good old press. Now I need to do a little bit more work on there, but hopefully you can see how this is going nice and flat. Definitely need some more work on this back look. Once we've done that, we're going to be back at the good old ironing, back at the sewing machine, and we're going to have a look at whether we're going to use a twin needle or not. If not, we're still going to show you what the next step is. So spend some time making your neckline look beautiful. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so let's get this neckline finished. I actually have a twin needle in my sewing machine now, because I'm going to do it using a twin needle. As the instructions state, you don't have to use a twin needle, you can use a regular needle. But regardless of which you're using, the first things that you need to do is to increase your stitch length to 3.5. And this is a straight stitch that you're wanting to use. If you're using a twin needle, you're going to reduce your tension, your top tension, just by a quarter. You don't need to do this if you're just using a regular needle, so only if you're doing the twin. And the only difference is, hopefully you can see there, that this is the line of the neckband where it meets the bodice, and that is halfway across that toe. And that is where I'm going to line up if I'm using a twin needle, okay? If you're using a regular needle, you're just going to line up the that exact same line with this edge. That's all you need to do. And you'll just have a single row of stitching. And that is not necessarily the wrong thing to do. I've got a twin needle, so I've set mine up for that. It does give a really nice looking edge, to be fair, and that's why I've chosen to do it this way. Some machines can't have a twin needle, and if you do have a twin needle capacity on your machine, just note that you need to thread each needle separately. Sometimes you can struggle with it, the threads catching with each other, so hopefully that doesn't happen. But yes. And then we're just going to sew. So we're going to go back and forwards as normal. So with a twin needle, that's all. You're not stitching anything differently. You're still stitching exactly the same. It's just that two needles are in operation. What I wanted to show you was, whilst I'm doing this, I'm trying to make this bodice straight without stretching the neckband, which can be tricky. And what I'm actually doing when I'm doing that is I'm stretching out the seam allowance underneath, and that's what I'm trying to do. So we're trying to kind of replicate what we did at the ironing board. So when you see me manipulating this fabric, that's exactly what I'm doing. So I've got lots of things to do really. I'm making sure that I'm lining up this seam with either the halfway point of the toe of the foot or the edge, depending on the needle. I'm making sure that the seam allowance is still under the bodice, still under this bit and not flipped up. And I'm also making sure it's laying flat, so I'm kind of stretching it out as I go. So it is a bit of a tricky process. So again, hopefully you'll notice I'm going nice and steady. Once you've done this, we're going to give it a last press. So I shall see you at the ironing board and we'll see how this has turned out. Okay, so here we are. Just going to give a good old press, and hopefully you'll agree that's a really lovely looking neckline. So far that's the bodice completed, and that's a massive achievement. You may want to grab yourself a coffee at this point. I know I'm going to. You should be so pleased at where you've got to. Hopefully you didn't have to unpick your neckline. Do you know what? It happens, and don't be too disheartened by it. It is just one of those things. I wish I've researched the ways to fix it, but stretched fabric can be stretching differently, and there's all sorts of things that are against us, if you like, at that point. So yeah, don't stress about it if you had to, but learn from that, and the next time, maybe if you've got a similar type of fabric or you're using that type of fabric again, maybe think, is it the right length for that neckband? There are lots of different calculations. One of them says that it should be 10% less. I'm not quite sure I agree with that. I think that might be too much, but who am I to change that? But yeah, hopefully you didn't have a big problem, and you're all happy and excited, because that's a real professional finish that you've got there on your neckband. So don't underestimate how fantastic that is. Just whilst we're chatting, I'm taking out my twin needle and I'm just resetting my stitch length to 2.5 and resetting my tension so that we're ready to do the sleeves. I have also got myself a coffee. It can be stressful, this sewing. We'd all deserve a coffee. So whilst I thread this up, you guys can be doing the same. Hopefully you're enjoying this project. It has, like I said at the beginning, there are a few points of difference. So the neckband is definitely something that is a technique to be learned. Knowing when to stretch the fabric, which parts of the fabric to stretch, is really like a great skill to have. But once you've nailed it, I don't think they'll be scary anymore. We're going to go on to sleeves, which again can be a scary thing for people. What I do have to say is that putting a sleeve into a stretch fabric is much easier than putting a sleeve into a woven fabric. So hopefully you'll like this process. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our sleeves and we're going to fold them with the right sides together, and we're going to pin them down the edge. So I'll do that and then I'll hold it up to show you. We do this bit together, nice and calm. Nice and calm. I have to say, I'm looking forward to having more of these tops. I need some longer ones for the winter, definitely, and some higher necks, I think, for the winter. The high neck is not particularly high. It's maybe like an inch, 3 centimetres higher than this one. But yeah, it'll be, I think I'll definitely have a wardrobe full of them so that I can just mix and match. I think that's what's really important about the new collection, is that it really is like you can dress them up, down, change the seasons. It's really important to me because we don't always have time to make the new faddy fashion. I actually need a wardrobe that works for me, not kind of works in that moment. So yeah, kind of looking forward to this. So I've pinned my sleeves with the right sides together. I just wanted to show you this little kink at the bottom and explain why it's there. So when you stitch, I want you to stitch down and then the kinks, just follow this sort of line with your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. What that's there for is that when we finish this, we're going to turn the fabric up. So if I just unpin that bottom bit and show you what I mean. So the finished sleeve, when we've done, is going to look like that with the hem. So that's why that's shaped. Imagine if it wasn't shaped, this piece of fabric that we're going to turn up wouldn't be long enough to go around our bicep. So it would kind of really cause you a problem when you were doing the hemming. So I would suggest that you take note of that little blip and stitch it accordingly. So I'm going to leave you to stitch those two. Let me just have a check on the instructions. Sometimes I do the hems first before I attach them, so let's just have a look. I think we do the hems all at the end. Yes, okay. So then we're on step 7, which is actually inserting the sleeves. So once I've stitched, we'll come back together with our bruise and we'll go through that process. See you in a minute. Okay, so let's look at these sleeves. So what I have here is the bodice, and the bodice is inside out. And then I have the 2 sleeves and they are the right way round. And that's how I want us to start. So I'm going to pick up one of the sleeves and I'm going to put the hem into the hole like so. So that the seam that we just stitched along the sleeve matches the side seam of the bodice, and we're going to pull it down. We're then just going to check we've got the right sleeve. Remember we did the 2 notches on the back, so I'm going to follow the sleeve up and I've got 2 notches, follow the bodice up, oh, and I've got 1 notch. So I know that that is the wrong sleeve, so I'm going to take that one out and I'm going to put the right one in, exactly the same. So I'm going to take the hem of the sleeve and I'm going to put it inside the bodice through the armhole. And then I'm going to match and pin under the arm. Sorry, I'll be having to manipulate this fabric quite a bit as we go, but I will keep pausing and showing it to the camera. Once I've done the pin at the underarm, I'm going to do a pin at the single notch or the double notch, which you may have gone backwards or forward, it doesn't really matter. Notice I'm putting the pins on the inside of the sleeve. That's quite a nice tip for you. And then I'm going to go around here and match the double notch at the back. And then I've got a notch at the top which should match with the shoulder seam. So that's 4 places to match there. Just bear with me. Okay, so the sleeve is inside and I've got 4 pins, everything matching. Once I've done that, I'm going to start from the underarm. Doesn't matter which way I go, but between the underarm and the notches, the fabric should be quite flat. So there's no need to kind of do any easing, because that's what we do when we do a sleeve. But what I just want to show you in a second is the important bit, which is that I've pinned inside the sleeve, but I've also pinned approximately on the stitch line. So the reason I've pinned on the stitch line is this. So that's your sleeve head, and it's going to be taken in like that. So this is already bigger than the hole. So if we pin above, we're actually trying to match two different lengths. So if you think about it whilst I'm pinning, if you think about a racetrack, so when they set off to do the 400 metres, they all set off at a different point, because the inside lane, so let's call the inside lane the stitch line, is much shorter than the outside lane, isn't it? You know, if you think about a rainbow as well, so if you've got the first colour of the rainbow is a less distance than the last colour of the rainbow. So if you imagine that the first colour of the rainbow, or the inside lane of a race, is your stitch line, but the outside lane, or the outside colour of the rainbow, is the edge of the fabric, you can see that the edge of the fabric is longer. So that's why things can't match up, and that's why we have to do lots of manipulation of the fabric. But if you pin on the stitch line, the stitch lines should match, or they should match within sort of a couple of centimetres across the whole of the armhole. So that hopefully will help you. So that is why we're pinning on the inside on the stitch line. Some people actually draw the stitch lines on, so it gives them something to work towards. Because I'm experienced, I kind of know where that stitch line is, but there is nothing wrong with drawing it on if you feel that it helps you. You may not feel that you need to do this on a stretch fabric, but this process is exactly the same on woven. So that might help. Now, let me show you this to the camera. So now I've got this bit here, which is causing me a problem. This is the top. So this is the bodice, and this is the extra bit here of the arm that we need to ease in. Now, the best way to do that is to create the curve of the arm. And if I can pull this around there, create the curve, and then we're just going to gently ease that in to the curve. Can you see how all those ripples are sort of evenly spaced? I'm then going to pin. Now it's difficult because I'm doing it kind of blind, because you're behind me. You're in front of me, sorry, and I'm behind what I'm looking at. So I may have to turn it back to me. But I'm going to pin again, trying to stick approximately to that seam allowance. And all I can say is I'm smushing this excess upwards, so that what we should result in having is a stitch line where all your pins are. Just going to turn it around to check. That's all smooth, and all of that ripple is now up in the seam. Can you see that? So where we're stitching, where the pins are, is nice and smooth. The extra fabric is still there. Look, it's all rippled, but it's not rippled where we're going to stitch. And that's what we're looking for. I'm just going to pull this round so I can do the same on the other side. And that is all there is to it. Now, with stretch fabric, you might be able to cheat, because what you can do is to pull, grip, and then pin. And what that's doing really is just evenly distributing that ripple. So instead of doing it with your fingers manipulating that curve, it's doing it for you. But if you've got a woven fabric, you will have to do the process. So once you've got that all pinned in, so if I show you, we're all pinned nicely. I'm going to go to the machine, because that itself is another technique that I want to show you. Once you've seen that, you can go ahead and put both your sleeves in, and then all we have left is the hemming. Okay, so we're all pinned, and I just wanted to show you the process of actually stitching it, because it's I think a lot of people think that they put it on the machine, so they take this bit off here and put the sleeve on there, but actually that creates more problems. So we're going to show you how to do it this way. So we're inside the sleeve and the sleeve's coming up here. And what that means is if we're coming across any lumps and bumps and problems, we can see them and we can deal with them. So I'm going to start stitching. We're at our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. I'm going to try as best I can to keep my fingers out of the way. I've started off under the arm, so all of the seams are here, and we're going to just do our back stitch. And we're going to kind of work at a couple of inches at a time, because we can't just whiz around, because if we whiz around, we're going to have a problem. So again, although I am talking, I'm going to be doing it at the same sort of pace as what I ordinarily would. I'm going to keep checking under here that I have no lumps and bumps, and that's what these fingers are doing also. So just nice and gently, taking the pins out at the last moment. You're going to start to notice that we're going to get to where all the ripples are. And I'm going to start pulling this upwards. Remember, we had to create a curve to pin it nicely. Well, we also have to recreate that curve in order to stitch it nicely. And that's why we can only work with a certain amount of the stitch line at a time, because I can't think about what's happening up here, because I just need to work out what's happening where the foot is. So I'm constantly turning it round. I'm constantly checking with my fingers that I have no lumps and bumps. But equally, I'm not panicking. I'm just gently stitching all the way around. And you can see where all these ripples are coming, but I'm not pinning, or rather stitching, any of those ripples in place, because where we pinned is nice and flat. So this is a prime example. This is all the ripples. But if you look there where the pin is, it's nice and flat. And that's what we're going to keep. So I'm going to continue with this, and I'm going to do the other sleeve. And then guess what? We only have the hems to do. So once you've done your sleeves, if you put your twin needle back, if you're choosing to use a twin needle, if not, your regular needle is fine. And we'll do the hems on both the sleeve and the hem and the bottom. See you then. Okay, so you must have what looks like a perfect top without the hems. So let's go and do these hems. So it says in your instructions to do a 1.5 centimetre turn up on the bottom hem and 2 centimetres on the sleeve. So let's go for this one first. So I'm going to start in the middle because it's a curve. And again, we're going to have to use the stretch of the fabric. So let's just measure that 1.5 there. And I'm going to put my first pin there. I'm then going to go, I don't know, let's say we'll do the quarter point. We'll do one here. And I'm going to do the 1.5 again. Because what I'm trying to show you is how this happens. So you're going to go in that middle bump and measure your 1.5 centimetres again. You might think it's weird that I'm just picking any part of the tape measure up. I am actually measuring 1.5 centimetres. I'm just measuring it at wherever it is on my tape. You can get like guides for hems and things which do work, and it's sort of a bit of card that you push in and then you put up. But just for this process, I'm going to do it this way. And what you'll find as you keep going through this process is that you'll have a nice hem. One thing to note that I keep doing, I keep lifting it up so that I don't pin it to this side. What you can do, I couldn't quite get the camera angle right, but you can kind of put this on your ironing board. So I have the ironing board through here so that you don't get caught out by that. Now, this is looking lovely. I'll just check you've got a good camera angle. So that's looking really nice. We've maintained that curve. And then I'm just going to press it and just fix that lovely hem in place. Can you see? There we go, lovely hem. I'm going to do that all the way around. And then we're going to stitch it on the machine. But before I do that, whilst we're here, let's just show you how to deal with the sleeves. Now I find the sleeves much easier if I get the right camera angle. So remember we had that sort of different shape here. that point where it changed direction is where we need to turn it. So the first part I'm going to go is there, and then I'm going to fold the rest over. I'm going to check that that is the 2 centimeters, and it is. I'm going to pop a pin in. Then I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm just going to check as I do it before I put the pin in that it's at 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters, and then I'm going to put a pin. Now the one thing that I have just realised is if you're using, sorry, not if you're using, whatever you're using actually, you're going to be stitching from the right side of the fabric. So I'm going to be putting these pins in the right side. So I'm checking the 2 centimeters, sorry, on this side, but I'm going to put the pins on the right side. That will just make it much, much easier. So if you pin all the way around your 2 sleeves, all the way around your hem, checking with your tape measure all the way, but also pinning on the right side of the fabric. I'll then meet you at the sewing machine. So again, if you have your twin needle set up, if you're using it, if not, I will show you how to hem these. The reason it's slightly different if you're not using a twin needle is that you need a stitch that's going to stretch, and a stitch that's going to stretch quite a lot, because this sleeve especially is going to be stretching on your bicep, and we don't want that to cause any problems. Okay, so there's my nicely pinned sleeve. All the pins are on the right side of the fabric, and then I can just give it a quick press, and that's all beautiful, ready to be stitched. Okay, I'll leave you with your pinning and pressing, and I'll catch you at the sewing machine. Right, so we're here again. I'm on the sleeve. Now I've got my twin needle, so I've reduced my tension like before, and I've set my stitch length to 3.5, and this is the sleeve hem. So just like when we put the sleeve in, we're stitching sort of inside like this, so we're stitching from the right side, and I've lined up the edge here with the 1.5 centimeters. If you're using a single stitch, because we need it to stretch, you're going to use quite a big zigzag, so not a little zigzag like you've been using on the seams potentially. So we're going to set the zigzag to a stitch length of 2 and a width of 5. That should give you enough stretch, but you're still going to line up your foot in exactly the same way. You're just using a slightly different stitch, that's all. So we're just going to do our back stitch like we always do, and then we're going to just stitch all the way around the armhole. We're going to do exactly the same thing on the hem, following that lovely curve that we have. But what we're going to do on the hem, instead of lining it up at 1.5 centimeters, we're going to line it up to the 1 centimeter. Okay, so we'll just, because it's a different shaped hem. Now, when you've done this, you have finished this project. So well done for persevering, and I hope you love it. I want you to give it a good old press, and then you can join me for my ta-da moment. And hopefully at some point I'll see yours too. Et voila, my new Essential Edit top. This is the short sleeve version. It's also the cropped, but it's got the lowest neckline. I think this is going to be worn a lot. I really, really, really do like it. But as you can see, it doesn't kind of pull in too much at the waist, but it's stretched across the bust. I do love this. I hope you love yours. Please share. Give us some comments below if you've enjoyed the tutorial. Tell us what you think about our patterns, but more importantly, share the pictures. It's really, really important to me that we see everybody's body shape, everybody's style, so that everybody can be included. So please share it on social media, or if you're a bit self-conscious, just share it with me. I love to see everybody's projects, and I can't wait to see yours. Okay, till the next time, bye.